The glass door let out a quiet creak as the woman stepped into the dojo. The space was polished and precise, with rows of red mats laid like a battlefield waiting for warriors. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but the air was heavier with something else judgment. She moved with an ease that didn't match the bright yellow belt knotted around her waist. Her training guy was clean but worn, and the faded stitching at the shoulders said more than she did. For a moment no one seemed to notice her, but that moment passed quickly. One of the instructors, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a voice that belonged in a locker room, looked up and smirked. He nudged the guy next to him, who leaned against the wall like he'd seen it all before. The first one called out loud enough for the whole room to hear, asking if she'd taken a wrong turn on the way to a yoga class. She didn't flinch. Her eyes scanned the room quietly, taking in the energy, the people, the hierarchy already forming in the way bodies were positioned. The second instructor, leaner with an oily sort of charm, chuckled under his breath and crossed his arms like he was about to enjoy a show. A few of the younger students glanced at her, unsure whether to join in the laughter or look away. One girl, barely 20 and wearing a green belt, shifted her stance and stared at the floor. The tension had settled over the room like a fog. The woman gave her name calmly and said she was looking to get back into training. Her voice was low and steady, with a tone that didn't beg for approval. The first instructor raised an eyebrow and repeated her belt rank as if he'd misheard it, his voice dripping with disbelief. He asked if she was aware that this wasn't a casual gym class and that their students trained hard not just for fitness but for discipline, control, and mastery. She nodded, still standing still quiet. His words filled the silence, but they didn't shake her. He told her she could sit and watch, maybe see what real martial arts looked like. His partner added that Tuesday nights were better suited for her kind, older ladies looking for a new hobby, something gentle on the knees. The way they grinned at each other said everything. She gave a short nod and stepped to the side, taking a seat near the wall. From that angle she could see every movement on the mat and every glance tossed her way. They'd already decided who she was, and they weren't subtle about it. No one asked about her background. No one cared to. In their eyes she had already been measured, weighed, and dismissed. And yet she sat calmly watching, waiting, like someone who had seen this before and knew exactly how it would unfold. Amanda Miller was 42 years old and had spent more than half her life on the mats. She used to teach martial arts full-time, running her own studio just outside of Denver. Her classes were known for being focused, but kind, intense, but never intimidating. She didn't leave because she stopped loving the work. She left because the noise around it became louder than the purpose. Rival instructors, ego-driven students, and a culture obsessed with hierarchy had chipped away at the thing she once believed in. By the time she closed the doors to her school, Amanda wasn't burnt out. She was just tired of fighting battles that had nothing to do with the art itself. So she packed her things and moved to a quieter place, one where no one knew her name and no one expected her to prove anything. The town was small, peaceful, tucked against the edge of a forest that reminded her to breathe deeper. She rented a modest one-bedroom apartment, started volunteering at the library, and spent most of her afternoons walking. For the first time in years, there was silence, without tension. Amanda didn't plan on returning to martial arts, not in the way people expected anyway. She wasn't chasing medals or belt colors or admiration, but it stayed in her body like breath. Some mornings, without thinking, she'd find herself moving through old forms in the living room barefoot on the hardwood floor, hands carving the air with precision. Her body remembered even when her mind wanted to forget. She had taught hundreds of students, many of whom never knew the full extent of her credentials. That was never the point. She believed in discipline and using technique to develop character, not ego. Her reasons for walking into that suburban dojo were simple. She missed the rhythm, the flow of bodies moving together, the way a well-run class could feel like music. But more than anything, she wanted to feel connected to something again. Not a school or a title, but the essence of what martial arts was meant to be. A practice that strengthened people, not separated them. Amanda looked ordinary to most people. Her hair was always pulled back in a loose ponytail strand, slipping free without apology. She wore jeans from the clearance rack and scuffed sneakers she'd had for years. There was nothing flashy about her. No designer gym bag, no posture screaming confidence. Just a quiet steadiness, the kind that made people pause for reasons they couldn't explain. She didn't carry herself like someone looking for approval. She moved like someone who already knew what she stood for. And when she walked into that dojo, she wasn't there to impress anyone. She had tied on the yellow belt by choice, not because it matched her level, but because it removed the expectations. It allowed her to observe, to learn who people were before they decided who she was. There was a calm in her that came from being underestimated too many times to count. And over the years, she'd stopped trying to correct people. The truth always revealed itself eventually. She hadn't come to teach, not yet. She hadn't come to challenge anyone. She came because she still believed in what martial arts could be if stripped of ego. Amanda didn't need a dojo to feel whole, but she still hoped to find one where people valued the right things, where respect was earned through action, not demanded through rank. She didn't need to be the best in the room. She just needed to be in a room where doing your best meant something. The dojo had the kind of aesthetic that tried to impress before anyone ever threw a punch. Hardwood floors, spotless red mats, and calligraphy scrolls lined up in perfect symmetry along the walls. Every inch of the space whispered tradition, but the tone in the room said something else entirely. There was a stiffness in the air that didn't come from discipline. It came from surveillance. Eyes always watching, not to guide, but to judge. At the center of that watchful energy stood Rick. Thick-chested, with a buzzed head and arms that barely fit into his GI, he walked like every step announced his authority. He rarely smiled unless someone made a mistake. Jordan wasn't much friendlier, but he smiled more often. The kind of smile that looked like it came with a price. He had sharp features, always leaned just a little too comfortably against things, and spoke with a drawl that wrapped insults in silk. Together they ran the place like it was their private kingdom. Belt colors were badges of access, and lower ranks stayed quiet unless spoken to, especially if they were women. It wasn't written anywhere, but you could feel the rules in the room. The way new students stayed near the wall. The way female students bowed just a little deeper when answering questions. Rick taught with volume. He barked instructions, corrected form with sharp claps, and made sure everyone knew who was in charge. Jordan preferred precision. He critiqued like a chef, plating meals calm cold and always watching for a flaw. They spoke about honor, but the room felt like a courtroom. You were either impressing them or embarrassing yourself. There wasn't much space in between. Most of the senior students mirrored their energy. Confident, clipped, and calculated. Those who didn't faded to the back, quiet, just trying to get through each class without drawing attention. Newcomers were tested, not welcomed. If they survived the first few sessions without breaking down or walking out, they were allowed to exist. But never before they were reminded who held the power. There were stories, of course. A woman in her 50s had come once, eager and humble. After 2 classes of public corrections and snide remarks, she never returned. No one asked why. To Rick and Jordan, that was just the system working. Their standards were high, they said. It wasn't their fault if people couldn't keep up. But every now and then someone noticed the contradiction. How the same technique done by a favored student earned praise, but by another earned silence. How confidence was welcomed in men, but arrogance in women. Still few challenged the structure. Most had accepted it. The dojo worked like a ladder, and questioning those at the top usually meant stepping off it entirely. For Amanda, the signs were everywhere. The way eyes lingered longer on her than on the male students. The smirk Jordan gave her belt. The slight pause in Rick's voice before speaking to her like he was choosing words to wound rather than welcome. It wasn't her first time walking into a place like this, but every time still left a bruise no matter how calm she appeared. Amanda stood just inside the dojo, hands loosely folded in front of her. Her voice was calm when she asked if she could join the session. Rick looked up from where he was talking to a few students and gave a short laugh that echoed off the hardwood walls. He didn't answer her right away. Instead, he gave her a long, slow once-over like he was trying to decide if she was serious or just confused. Jordan stepped in before Rick could respond, his tone smooth but sharp. He said their program wasn't really designed for beginners with soft joints and weekend goals. Rick chuckled and added that the yoga studio down the block might be a better fit. The words were said casually, like a joke between friends, but no one laughed. Amanda stayed quiet, still polite, still standing. She repeated that she was looking to get back into training that she had experience but was out of practice. Her words were measured, her posture relaxed, but the tension in the room ticked up with every second. Jordan raised an eyebrow and said they ran an advanced program, not some suburban kickboxing club. Rick motioned toward the group of male students stretching on the mats and said most of them had been training for years, and they took that seriously. He told Amanda it wouldn't be safe to throw someone like her into that mix. The room had started to shift. A few students had stopped moving. One girl, maybe in her late 20s, stood near the wall with her arms crossed tight over her chest. Her green belt hung neatly at her waist, and her name tag read, Kelly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked between the instructors and Amanda with something that looked like discomfort. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other and looked down at the floor. No one else said a word. Amanda offered to observe. Rick waved her toward the bench without much interest. Jordan added that the real action would probably be too much for her anyway, but she was welcome to watch and learn. Amanda walked to the bench in silence. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She just sat, legs crossed, hands in her lap, and watched the floor like it had answers no one else could see. Amanda sat quietly for most of the session, her expression unreadable. The instructors moved through drills, calling out commands with force, casting quick glances her way between rounds. The smirks hadn't left their faces since the moment she walked in. Rick paced near the center mat, making a loud point about how experience couldn't be faked. Jordan added something about the dangers of ego in untrained students. Their words weren't aimed at the group anymore. They were aimed at her. Amanda stood without a word, stepping onto the edge of the mat. Her voice was steady low, but carried enough weight to cut through the chatter. She asked if she could offer a brief demonstration to show where she stood. There was a pause, like no one quite believed she was serious. Then Rick laughed and asked if she wanted to show off her stretching routine. Jordan tilted his head and said they were happy to indulge her if she insisted. Amanda gave a quiet nod. Nothing about her changed on the surface, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop half a degree. Rick waved his hand like this was just another part of the entertainment. He said they'd keep it light and safe, of course. No one wanted any lawsuits. A few students chuckled, unsure if they were supposed to. Kelly looked up from her place near the wall, her eyes narrowing slightly. The group had begun to circle around now, a loose ring forming like something was about to happen. Amanda moved to the center, each step measured. She stood across from Rick, who stretched his shoulders and rolled his neck with exaggerated flair. He looked confident, amused, already sure of how this would end. Jordan stayed at the edge, offering to referee. His grin made it clear he expected nothing more than a clumsy few seconds before calling it off. He told everyone to watch closely and take notes on what not to do. Amanda's stance shifted subtly. Nothing flashy. Just a drop in weight, a soft bend in the knees, a stillness that didn't match her earlier presence. A couple of the more advanced students frowned, noticing something different in the way she held herself. Rick told her to go ahead, said ladies first. Amanda didn't speak. She simply stepped in. Not fast, not aggressive, just one clean, precise motion. Rick blinked. His front foot shifted. There was a murmur in the crowd. Jordan straightened his back slightly. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the mats had closed in without warning. No one was laughing anymore. Not yet. But they were holding their breath. Because somehow, without doing much at all, Amanda had changed the tone of the room. And whatever happened next, no one could look away. Rick lunged first, quick and confident, throwing a straight punch meant more to impress than to hit. Amanda didn't flinch. She slipped sideways just enough for the strike to miss her body moving like water instead of muscle. There was a flicker in Rick's eyes, a stutter in his rhythm as he adjusted his stance. He came again, this time with a tighter combination, aiming lower, faster. Amanda weaved through it all, never rushing, never overstepping, always just beyond reach. She wasn't flashy. She didn't swing. She let him burn energy, staying one breath ahead, reading his balance, his tension, his tells. It wasn't about dominance, it was about control. Gasps started to ripple through the students. One of the newer guys actually leaned forward, jaw open, forgetting to blink. Kelly's brow furrowed. She whispered something to the girl next to her, both too focused to look away. Rick grunted and stepped back, shook his head, then charged with more force. He wanted to catch her off guard, break her rhythm, but she absorbed the pressure without panic, pivoted on her heel, and tapped his leg with a light sweep that nearly buckled his base. He stumbled, just for a second, but that second was loud. Amanda didn't follow up. She reset, calm as ever, her breathing steady. The silence in the dojo grew tight. Jordan called out, trying to sound amused, but there was tension under his words. He told Rick to get serious. Rick didn't respond. His focus had changed. The grin was gone. Another flurry came, fists and feet moving faster now, less technique, more aggression. Amanda stayed close inside his range and made him miss again and again. Her arms moved like branches in wind, redirecting instead of resisting. She tapped his wrist mid-strike, redirecting it just enough to unbalance him. No power, just timing, just intention. It landed hard in the minds watching, that this woman, the one they'd laughed at, wasn't surviving the match. She was conducting it. One student muttered that she hadn't even broken a sweat. Another nodded slowly, like a question had just been answered without words. This wasn't luck. This was mastery. Rick backed away, blinking fast, his stance less polished now. Amanda still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. The lesson was already landing, and every person in that circle felt it like a shift in gravity. Everything they thought they knew about rank, about power, about what a real martial artist looked like was suddenly in question, and they couldn't stop watching. Rick's breath had turned shallow. His steps weren't sharp anymore, just heavy. Amanda hadn't rushed him, hadn't thrown more than a glance of effort, yet he looked like someone on the last round of a match he never trained for. She stepped in again calmly, like nothing had changed. Rick raised his hands too late. Amanda caught his wrist with one hand, guided it down with the other, and rotated her body with such precision that by the time he realized what was happening, he was on the ground. The hold wasn't brutal. It was clinical. Her weight locked his arm in place, his shoulder frozen at the edge of pain. He couldn't move without making it worse, and she wasn't pressing, just holding him there, letting him feel it. The room stopped breathing. No one spoke. No one blinked. Amanda looked down at Rick, her face still composed. She released him gently, took a step back, and gave him room to sit up. He didn't stand. He just stayed on the mat, one hand on his shoulder, eyes darting across the circle. Jordan took a step forward, his voice louder now, trying to reclaim some kind of authority. He said that was enough, that things had gone too far. But Amanda turned to him with the same calm stillness and simply shifted into a stance. He hesitated. It was small, but visible. Then he moved quick, a sweeping approach meant to catch her before she settled. It didn't matter. She stepped to the side, redirected his energy with a grip to his sleeve, and turned him toward the mat. Before anyone could follow, he was face down, arm bent behind him, spine locked. It was so smooth it didn't register until it was done. Jordan let out a gasp, more surprise than pain. Amanda crouched beside him, not cruel, just exact. She held the position long enough for everyone to see it, then released. He scrambled back like he'd touched fire. The silence that followed wasn't just about shock. It was about realization. Everything that had defined this dojo volume presence, intimidation, had just collapsed in front of them. Rick sat, hunched. Jordan avoided eye contact, and Amanda stood at the center, completely composed. No rank, no shouting, no flash. Just quiet, undeniable control, and no one in the room could deny what they had seen. Not anymore. Amanda stood still in the center of the mat, her breath steady, her eyes calm. Around her, no one spoke. Rick was still seated, his expression blank, while Jordan stayed frozen at the edge, rubbing his wrist and avoiding her gaze. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When she finally spoke, the quiet made every word feel louder. She said her name again slowly this time, like it mattered now. She explained that she had been training for over 25 years, that she held black belts in multiple disciplines, had taught at national seminars, and competed internationally. No one moved. Even the clock on the wall seemed quieter. Amanda didn't boast. She simply stated facts, letting them land with their own weight. She glanced down at her yellow belt, then told them she wore it by choice. Because walking in with a black belt meant people either feared you or tried to break you. But a yellow belt that showed you how they treated the ones they thought didn't matter. Her words settled like a layer of dust. Thick, uncomfortable, real. She looked toward Rick and Jordan, but didn't aim anything at them directly. Instead, she turned to the students. Her voice softened. She said martial arts should be about discipline, growth, and respect. A few heads lowered. Kelly stared at the floor, arms crossed tight against her chest. One of the teenage boys shifted uncomfortably, cheeks red. Amanda didn't blame them. Not directly. But her presence did what words couldn't. It forced everyone to look inward. She said every dojo has its culture, and culture is shaped by what's allowed to happen when no one's watching. She had come here not to test anyone, but to find out if this place still honored the art behind the belts. There was no applause, no dramatic gasp, just stillness and the quiet truth that no one could ignore. Rick didn't speak. Jordan didn't argue, because deep down, they knew. They'd been exposed not by power, but by someone who never needed to use it to prove she had it. And for the first time since she walked in, Amanda wasn't the one being judged. They were. The silence broke when Kelly stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but it held. She said this wasn't the first time someone had been treated like they didn't belong. She reminded everyone about the older woman who came in last spring, how Rick told her she was too stiff to learn, then laughed about it with Jordan after class. Some of the newer students looked surprised. Others looked down, remembering. Another student, Marcus, spoke next. He'd been training there for 3 years. He said he always felt something was off, but never knew how to say it. He mentioned how his little sister had wanted to join, how Jordan told her girls didn't usually last long in this program. He had believed them then. Now he just looked tired. Voices started rising, not in anger, but clarity. People who had been silent for months found the space to speak. It spread like a ripple, small truths stacking on each other, until the whole room felt different. One student recalled being told to man up when he got hurt. Another remembered being corrected in front of the class for asking too many questions. None of it felt like discipline anymore. It just felt like control. Rick opened his mouth once or twice, but didn't say anything. He kept shifting his weight, arms crossed like posture could protect his pride. Jordan stood still, his usual smirk wiped, clean eyes darting as if trying to find a way out. The room had turned, and it hadn't been loud. It had been honest. Kelly looked at Amanda, then back at the group. She said this wasn't what martial arts was supposed to feel like. She said they deserved better than fear disguised as leadership. That hit harder than anything Amanda had done on the mat, because it didn't come from power. It came from choice. Rick and Jordan were no longer the center. They were just two men standing at the edge of a circle that had shifted away from them. No one bowed. No one asked what came next. They all already knew. The loyalty that had once held this place together had found a new center. And it wasn't built on titles. It was built on truth. Amanda stepped back from the center of the mat, her voice calm but firm. She said she hadn't come here to prove anything or take anyone's place. She came because she still believed in what martial arts could be, and she had hoped this place believed in it too. She looked around the room not with anger but with quiet clarity. The weight in her words didn't come from volume. It came from knowing exactly what she stood for. She said she wouldn't be returning. Not because of how she had been treated, but because this dojo no longer represented the values she trained her entire life to uphold. Respect had to be the foundation, or there was no point. Her tone was steady, not bitter, not boastful, just done. Some students looked disappointed, others looked relieved, but everyone listened. Then Amanda added one final thing. She said anyone who wanted to train in a space built on discipline, humility, and mutual respect could meet her at Memorial Park the next morning at 7. No uniforms, no belts, just people willing to learn and grow together. She didn't wait for applause. She didn't need validation. She picked up her gym bag and nodded once toward the group before walking toward the door. Right before she left, she turned and said what would stay with them long after she was gone. A true teacher lifts others, not puts them down to feel taller. And then she was gone, just like that. Not in defeat, but with the grace of someone who had already won something far bigger. The sun had barely risen when Amanda arrived at the park. Dew still clung to the grass, and the air was cool with that quiet stillness only early morning could hold. She walked up the paved path in a plain t-shirt, worn sneakers, and a water bottle swinging by her side. 15 people were already waiting. Some stood alone, hands tucked into hoodie pockets. Others gathered in pairs, talking in low voices, glancing around as if still unsure this was really happening. Kelly was there, standing near the front with her arms crossed, but her face softer than the day before. Marcus had brought his sister, the same one Jordan had once dismissed. Even Mrs. Lawrence, the older woman who had quietly vanished from the dojo months ago, stood near a bench, eyes wide with hope. Amanda greeted each of them with a nod and a quiet smile. No speeches, no formality, just presence. She dropped her bag near a patch of open grass and stood where everyone could see her. She began with something simple. A breath, then a bow. She explained that training here wouldn't be about rank or proving anything. It would be about learning how to move with purpose and treat others with care. They formed a loose circle around her. No mats, no mirrors, just sky above and earth beneath their feet. Amanda asked them to spread their weight evenly. Feel the ground. pay attention. She moved slowly through a warm-up, guiding them with simple instructions. Nothing fancy, nothing designed to show off. She wanted them to feel what balance meant, not just physically, but internally. As they followed her lead, something shifted in the group. Shoulders lowered, breathing deepened. It wasn't about who could move fastest or punch hardest. It was about being there together, starting again. Amanda paused after a short round of movement. She looked at the circle and said that real strength never comes from being the loudest in the room. It comes from listening, from knowing when to act and when to wait. She talked about the difference between control and care, how martial arts had been twisted in some places into a way to intimidate rather than guide, and how they had a choice to build something different here. The students listened closely. Some nodded. A few blinked faster than normal, like they hadn't heard words like that in a long time. One of the teenagers, David, asked if they would ever wear belts again. Amanda smiled and said, maybe someday. But today they would focus on earning something deeper than color. She led them into basic drills, stances, footwork. The rhythm was gentle, steady. They corrected each other with kindness, laughed when someone lost balance. It felt nothing like the dojo they had left behind. Amanda corrected Marcus's posture with a tap and a whispered cue. She showed Mrs. Lawrence how to pivot without hurting her knees. She watched everyone not to measure them, but to support them. As the hour passed, people who had arrived with hesitation now stood taller. There was no need for titles here. Everyone had space to grow. When they finished, Amanda gathered them once more. She thanked them for showing up, for choosing to be part of something new. She said the hardest part of martial arts wasn't the punches or the forms. It was staying true to your values when everything around you tells you to do otherwise. She looked around the group and reminded them that they were capable of more than they had been allowed to believe, that their worth wasn't tied to how others had treated them. She ended the morning with one last message. If you've ever been judged for what you look like or where you started, know that your story doesn't end there. You get to write it every day with every step you take. The group bowed together. Some wiped their eyes. Others lingered after asking questions, offering to help next time. Amanda packed her things slowly, watching them talk, laugh and stretch beneath the rising sun. She didn't need a building to teach. She didn't need a title. She had everything she needed right there on the grass. Because in that park among those people, she hadn't just started a new class. She had started a new kind of dojo, one built not on rank but on respect, not on fear but on purpose. And everyone there knew it, even the quiet ones, especially them.